I had no choice.
One scene. 20 seconds, 4 words. That's all it took. One scene to change everything. 20 seconds to turn a destroyer into a protector. 4 words to take a soldier of vengeance and force him to question everything. For 50 years, Shadow has held on to one belief. The world took everything from him. So he's going to take everything from the world. And then this moment happens.
You always have a choice.
But how? How did Shadow go from Earth's biggest threat to its unlikely savior? And why does this one moment hit so hard? It's all because of one character Shadow never even met, Longclaw. To understand what I mean by that, we have to go back to the moment we first see Shadow on Prison Island. A high-security military facility buried deep within classified government files, created by Guardian Unit of Nations, or GUN. For half a century, Shadow was kept here, suspended in animation, locked away like a relic too dangerous to be left unchecked, but too valuable to be destroyed, until he woke up. The guards barely had time to react. Shadow tore through every single one of them, chaos energy surging through his body like it had been waiting decades to be unleashed. And then he escaped. Air shoes propelling him across the ocean, Shadow left the island behind. But he wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going, the facility he once called home. It was abandoned now, just a shell of what it had been 50 years ago. The halls were empty, but the memories weren't. This was where he had lived, where he once felt the happiest, and where Maria had died. For the first time since waking up, Shadow let himself feel it. The weight, the rage, the grief. Then, a voice.
It's good to see you, Shadow. I knew you'd come home.
We learn that Shadow isn't alone in his pain of losing Maria. He shares it with Gerald Robotnik. We're just left wondering, who was Maria? Well, Maria is one of Shadow's only memories. It isn't of war. It isn't even of himself. It's of Maria, the girl who saw him not as a weapon, but as a friend. The one who showed him kindness when no one else would, and the one who died because of it. 50 years ago, Shadow was captured by GUN. He wasn't treated like a living being. He wasn't seen as a person. He was Project Shadow, a military experiment designed to harness chaos energy for the government's own use. And the one leading it? Professor Gerald Robotnik, a man tasked with unlocking Shadow's true potential. But in time, he became something more, because while GUN saw a weapon, Gerald saw a grandson bonding with his granddaughter Maria. And Maria, she saw a friend. Unlike the soldiers who ran tests on him, unlike the researchers who poked and prodded at him, she treated him like he mattered, like he was more than just an experiment. They spent every moment together. She showed him books, music, the stars.
You're my friend, and you can do or be anything you want.
She told him about Earth, a place full of color, full of life, full of things he could only dream of seeing. And for a moment, Shadow felt something he didn't recognize: happiness. It didn't last. Because the more time and research went into Shadow, the more GUN started to fear him. He wasn't just an experiment anymore. He was a threat. And threats, they don't get to live. The decision was made. Project Shadow had to be seized. Knowing this would be coming at some point, Gerald came prepared.
Kids, we have to go, now!
On the day GUN came to put Shadow in suspended animation, they made one final run for it.
They want to take Shadow away from us, Maria!
But it was too late. The facility fell into chaos.
What are you doing? Those are children!
And just before the trio could reach the exit, a single gunshot was fired, followed by an explosion. The world went silent. And above all, Shadow went silent. Amongst the chaos, he looked over at Gerald, tears in his eyes, on his knees, towering over Maria, laying on the ground motionless. She was gone. Just like that, everything was taken away from Shadow and Gerald. And so, 50 years later, they allied once again, to take revenge by taking away everything from humanity, the same way humanity took everything from them. Shadow and Gerald had everything they needed to make that happen. The Eclipse Cannon was ready. The only thing standing in their way was the final keycard locked inside Gun's London headquarters. They infiltrated, had some struggle with Team Sonic, but in the end, Shadow finds Commander Walters with the keycard. And Shadow, he didn't hesitate.
Commander Walters.
He pulled back his fist, chaos energy crackling in his palm, and then he swung. The impact sent Walters flying, the keycard slipping from his hand as his body crashed hard against the ground. Shadow exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time since waking up. It was over. The last piece was in place. But something was wrong. Walters wasn't moving. And then Shadow realized it wasn't Walters at all. It was Tom Wachowski. Before he could process it, a voice cut through the air, shaky, frantic, filled with a pain Shadow recognized all too well. Shadow turned and saw Sonic rushing toward the body, dropping to his knees, shaking him, waiting for a response that wasn't coming. And suddenly, Shadow wasn't in London anymore. He wasn't in the present at all, because he had seen this before. 50 years ago, on a cold, sterile floor, Maria had fallen just like this. Shadow saw her again, the way she had reached for him, eyes wide in shock, struggling to speak through the pain. The way he had stood there, powerless, watching the only person who had ever cared about him slip away. And now, Sonic was living that exact moment. The way he clutched Tom's body, the way his voice broke as he called out his name again and again, refusing to accept what had just happened. The way his entire world shattered before his eyes. Shadow had spent 50 years believing he was the only one who had suffered, that no one else could possibly understand what it meant to lose everything. But now, for the first time in his life, he wasn't so sure. If Shadow was wrong about this, what else had he been wrong about? Before he could finish any strain of thought, he saves the Robotniks and teleports to the Eclipse spaceship where he should have felt satisfied. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt nothing. And for the first time, he needed to hear it. The words felt strange leaving his mouth, like he wasn't the one saying them. But once they were out, he couldn't take them back. Gerald turned to him, expression cold, unshaken. Then the memories come rushing back of how humanity killed Maria in cold blood. The rage sends him into a spiral, powering the cannon with his chaos energy. But Maria never sees justice the way Shadow had always envisioned. In the next sequence, everything he once knew would change forever. As he looks out the window, a streak of gold ripped through the station like a missile. Supersonic crashed into him, knocking him through the air, sending him spiraling out of the station. He barely had time to recover before Sonic was on him again, voice filled with something Shadow recognized instantly: rage.
You hurt my family!
The words weren't just an accusation, they were a declaration, because Sonic wasn't here to stop a villain. He wasn't here to save the world. He was here for revenge. And in that instance, Shadow saw himself in him. Sonic was doing exactly what Shadow had done for 50 years. The battle continued and clashed across the planet. They fought in the sky, through cities, across oceans, fists colliding with the force of explosions, each hit shaking the ground beneath them. Until finally, Sonic lands one devastating blow and sends Shadow hurtling into the sky, past the atmosphere, into the moon. Before he could recover, Sonic was already there. He grabbed Shadow and dragged him across the moon's surface, carving a trench through the rock. Shadow knew he was done. He looked at Sonic angrily and said,
Go ahead, finish it! I'm right here!
But exactly those words made Sonic remember who he was, who Tom told him to be.
You didn't let your pain change who you are. In here.
Sonic was blinded by his rage, the same way Shadow was, but he doesn't let his rage get the better of him, so he lets Shadow go, which is all the more confusing to Shadow.
You won. Take your revenge.
Sonic tells him that revenge doesn't make anyone win, sending Shadow into a moment of self-reflection. Ever since Maria died, all he had left is pain. This pain was all he knew, and the world had to feel it. And in a moment of clarity, Sonic understands Shadow. He also felt this pain when he lost Longclaw.
Did your pain eventually go away?
Sonic explains to Shadow that the pain never goes away, and then he hits Shadow with the 4 words that completely change his character.
Maria might be gone,
But your love will always remain.
Love will always remain. As Shadow hears those words, his facial expression changes, because for 50 years he had convinced himself that vengeance was the only path forward, that the pain would never fade, that nothing was stronger than what had been taken from him. But now he wasn't so sure. His entire existence had been built around a lie he had told himself. Because if Sonic, who had just lost everything when losing Longclaw, could choose not to let his pain define him, then why couldn't he?
As if who you are in here.
He goes from angry to disbelief to acceptance. Maria never thought Shadow was dangerous. She thought Shadow could be anything he wanted.
The light shines, even though the stars are gone.
Maria was gone, but her love for him, her kindness, her memory, that never died. She had once told him that the light of a star shines even when the star itself is gone. For the first time, he understood what she meant, and for the first time, he was free. All because Sonic lost Longclaw the same way he lost Maria. Shadow was able to completely change his character. The moment was broken when Sonic saw it. The Eclipse cannon was still charging. Shadow's heart dropped.
This whole mess is my fault.
For so long, he had let his rage blind him. He thought he had no choice. But now, Sonic was right.
You always have a choice.
Together, they summoned the Chaos Emeralds one last time, their forms glowing as they transformed into Super Sonic and Super Shadow. They flew toward the space station, tearing through the waves of enemy robots Gerald had sent to stop them. Shadow fought harder than he ever had before, not out of anger, not out of vengeance, but out of something new. And when the Eclipse cannon was seconds away from firing, they knew what had to be done. There was no stopping the cannon anymore. All they could do was block the laser temporarily from destroying Earth while the others redirected it. And even when they succeeded in redirecting the shot, it was still too late. The reactor was overloading and would take Earth with it in its explosion. There was a choice to be made, and this time, Shadow was making the right one.
This is our last chance to do the right thing.
The space station trembled, on the verge of collapse. The reactor core flared dangerously, seconds away from complete detonation. Eggman bought Shadow some time. And Shadow? He exhaled slowly. His hands moved to his wrists, and then he removed his limiter rings. The energy exploded outward, crackling around him in violent waves of red and black chaos. His body felt weightless, unrestrained, like he was tapping into something even he had never fully understood. With everything he had, he pushed. The station groaned in protest, but it began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, faster. Shadow poured every ounce of strength he had into the final push, even as his body screamed in agony, even as his vision blurred. And in those last few moments, his mind drifted back to Maria. She never asked Shadow to destroy them. She asked him to protect them. Then the explosion came. The station erupted in a burst of light and fire, tearing itself apart in the vacuum of space. The force was enough to send shockwaves through the atmosphere, visible even from Earth. And Shadow? He was gone. At least, that's what it seemed like. The world watched, waiting, searching for any sign that he had survived. And after the credits rolled, we saw a glove we know all too well pick up a limiter ring. Earth was safe. The battle was over. But Shadow's story? It was just beginning, which can only leave us guessing what is to come. Shadow has a new sense of the world. He's no longer fueled by hatred. He no longer feels a duty to save the world as he already served that purpose. For so long, his purpose had been clear, even if it was built on the wrong foundation. And now that it's gone, what does he do? What does a warrior become when the war is over? That's exactly what he has to find out. And he's not alone. There's one other character who has lost everything, whose entire identity was built around following a greater force. Agent Stone. With Dr. Robotnik seemingly gone, his world has been shattered. He dedicated his entire life to serving the mad genius, blindly following him, putting up with his egotistical outbursts, his impossible demands, and his obsession with domination. And now, all of that is gone. No master, no orders, no direction. Stone and Shadow, two characters who were once defined by their loyalty to another, are now faced with the same question. And how will they deal with that? Could it be similar to the transformation Ernesto goes through in the pivotal scene of Disney's Coco? If you're not sure what exactly I'm talking about, please click here and see what is up. For now, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.